Hello and welcome to Business Incorporated. Many thanks for joining us. I am Bolaji Akinwale. On this week's edition of the program, we'll be taking a look at Nigeria's payment system. We all know that the Central Bank of Nigeria introduced the cashless policy as one of the ways to achieve financial inclusion in the economy. That means bringing all Nigerians to participate in the financial markets and using less cash in the economy. I'll be talking to the Chief Executive Officer at Unified Payment Services Limited. He is Agada Akwochi shortly on the program. But first, let's check out some headlines.
The Federation Accounts Allocation Committee allocated a total sum of 1.17 trillion naira to federal and state governments for the implementation of the Subsidy Reinvestment and Empowerment Program between January 2012 and September 2014. On a monthly basis, 35.54 billion naira was deducted from the gross collectible revenue by FAC and paid into the SureP account domiciled with the Central Bank of Nigeria. SureP was set up in January 2012 in the wake of the partial removal of subsidy on local consumption of petroleum products. The sharing formula required the federal government to warehouse 41% of the subsidy savings. The state and local governments shared 54%, while the remaining 5% is reserved for ecological challenges. Of the 35.55 billion naira distributed monthly, the federal government is allocated 15 billion naira, indicating a total amount of 495 billion naira for the 33-month period, while the states, local government and ecological fund got the balance of 675 billion naira. An analysis of the intervention areas of the SureP showed that in 2012, 33.36 billion naira, representing 18.53%, was budgeted for railway projects, while 85.50 billion naira was allocated for the construction of roads and bridges. The Federal Executive Council on Wednesday approved 1.1 billion naira for the purchase of 2 standard gauge locomotives. The locomotives are meant for the new standard gauge rail lines being constructed across the country. This was one of the resolutions reached at the weekly FEC meeting presided over by President Goodluck Jonathan. The Ministers of Information, Mr. Labaran Marco, Transport, Senator Idris Umar, and Health, Professor Onyebuchi Chukwu, briefed State House correspondents on the outcome of the meeting. Marco said the contracts included the design, manufacture, and commissioning of the 2 diesel locomotives with built-in power packs and standard gauge 1,435 mm for the Nigerian Railway Corporation. He said the contract was awarded to Messrs. CNR Darling Locomotives and Rolling Stock Limited and CCECC Nigeria Limited, with a delivery period of 10 months. Umar said the 2 locomotives were to be used for mass transport services on the Abuja-Kaduna standard gauge rail line, which is expected to be completed by the end of this year. Umar said the government was committed to the revival of the NRC, and as such, it was working assiduously to see the completion of the Abuja-Kaduna standard gauge line. Fitch has stated that some of the regulatory headwinds in Nigeria's banking sector had led to weaker profitability and stemmed credit growth in the first half of 2014. The rating agency also said Nigerian banks' assets growth and earnings would experience further fall over the next 18 months. Fitch, however, observed that the nation's banks were performing well despite the twin hurdles of tight monetary policy actions and new banking rules. The rating agency also said this is mostly supported by continuing robust economic growth. Nevertheless, it expects bank performance and growth to moderate over the next 18 months due to the Central Bank of Nigeria's actions aimed at protecting the economy and the banking system. The CBN had increased the cash reserve requirements on public sector deposits to 75% from 12% since July last year in order to curb inflation. It also reduced how much banks could charge account holders whenever they withdrew money as part of its plans to phase out commission on turnover charges.
now time to listen to Agada Akpochi, the CEO at Unified Payment Services Limited, as it talks to us about Nigeria's payment system, the journey so far. Thank you, Mr. Agada Akpochi, for your time with us on the program. First of all, I'd like you to take a look at the Nigerian payment system. How has it been so far?
The volume of transactions today for electronic payments in Nigeria has grown. And when we talk about electronic payments, the payment system is not just about the use of plastic on point-of-sale terminals. You have internet banking. You have even the clearing system for checks in Nigeria. All those are part of the payment system. What banks do also at their various branches, you have seen a lot of improvement. As customers of banks, people don't necessarily have to go into bank branches to carry out all transactions anymore. In terms of fraud also, the fraud ratio in Nigeria is quite low when you compare it with what is happening elsewhere in the world. So I would say that we have been making very good progress.
In the case of complaints by bank customers in relation to transaction failure, how has it been addressed?
First is to acknowledge that we do not have 100% approval rate, and that is expected. There's nowhere in the world that you have 100% approval rate. We want to see improvement in the approval rate currently in Nigeria, but what is obtainable today is not too poor. And in cases where there is transaction failure, as your own experience that you have shared with me, there is a process for ensuring that you, the cardholder, does not lose money. So once you make a complaint to your bank, there is a process called chargeback because you have been debited. So your bank will check with the bank that gave the POS terminal to the owner of the business where you went to pay. If that business owner has already been paid, then the money will be taken back from the business owner. On the other hand, if the business owner has not been paid, then it follows that money has not been taken from your bank, and then your bank has to make a refund to you. So there is a defined process for that, and it's widely acknowledged by all industry players, and there's also CBN regulation supporting that. So there's no reason why anyone should lose money in the unfortunate event that you have a transaction failure. And such failures could happen for different reasons, including the poor telecommunication infrastructure that we have in Nigeria. When your account is debited, a transaction message is supposed to be conveyed through different parties to the point of sale terminal. It is possible that within that process, there is a breakdown of communication. And so the appropriate data will then not be sent to the point of sale terminal. And for that reason, the business owner will not get an approval message and will not be in a position to provide you goods or service, or will ask you to make alternative arrangement for payment. But one thing is guaranteed: you cannot lose money.
Now let's review the Central Bank of Nigeria's cashless policy in terms of having to achieve financial inclusion. What's your view on this drive?
The first thing is to ask, what have they put in place? What is the central bank doing to achieve financial inclusion? A number of things, starting with the license that was granted different Nigerian companies to roll out mobile money. It is a way of making it easy for those who are otherwise financially excluded to be included. That is one example of that. The central bank also has granted licenses to many banks in Nigeria, and with appropriate regulatory framework, to introduce agency banking. That is to facilitate access to banking services outside the traditional bank branches. The central bank also, through another regulation, has been able to categorize the requirements for Know Your Customer. So hitherto, if you go to a bank, there is a standard requirement for all customers, irrespective of what you want to do. Today, there are 3 categories of such requirements. And that makes it easier for a number of people who otherwise will not be able to meet the rather stringent requirement for operating certain categories of account to still have access to banking services or financial services. So there are a number of things that the central bank has put in place to ensure financial inclusion. Now, the results we are beginning to see. We are beginning to see because if you look at it, there are many more people that open accounts without necessarily going to bank branches. From your telephone today, you can open a mobile money account. If you want to open a bank account today and you go into your bank, you may not have to provide a driver's license or an international passport as a means of identification. It may be sufficient for your bank to take your passport photograph and obtain your address. This again is made possible by the new approach of the Central Bank of Nigeria. And so there are many more people who have been brought in, but there are so many out there that need to be brought in. And so the CBN is doing a lot, and we're beginning to see progress, and I'm confident that more progress will be achieved in the future.